Hello, it's Mr. Ganino again, and here we are with our book, Nancy Drew, The Secret in the Old Attic by Carolyn Keene. Today I'm reading Chapter 5. A reminder that permission to post an audiobook version of this book to YouTube granted on March 27, 2020 by Penguin Random House Books for use with Voice Beers Junior Elementary School until June 30th of 2020. All right, Chapter 5, A Suspected Thief. It was impossible for Nancy to stifle a scream as the long, bony fingers brushed against her throat. She staggered backward. The candlelight flickered wildly. Come away before that thing gets you, shrieked someone behind her. The voice was Effie's. The maid, worried about Nancy, had followed her to the attic. It's nothing but a skeleton, said Nancy, her own voice a trifle unsteady. It struck you with its bony hand, quavered Effie. Oh, I'm getting out of this house tonight, and I'm never coming back, she announced, starting down the steps. Please don't go downstairs and frighten Susan, Nancy pleaded, her own fear gone. Surely you saw what happened. Yes, I did. You were attacked by a skeleton. No, Effie. The thing is hanging inside a wardrobe. One hand seems to be attached to a nail on the door. When I jerked it open, the arm swung out and the fingers brushed me. Nancy reached into the closet and touched the chalk-colored bones. What's a thing like that doing here anyway? Effie asked in a voice less shaky than before. I don't like it. Before Nancy could reply, they heard footsteps on the attic stairs. Mr. March called. Anything wrong up there? I heard someone scream. We found a skeleton in the wardrobe, Nancy explained. It startled us. Mr. March slowly climbed to the attic and went towards the open wardrobe. Oh, that, he said in relief. I'd forgotten all about it. Fact is, I didn't know Fip had put it in the closet. The elderly man then explained that the skeleton originally had been brought there by a young medical student, a cousin of Fip's. You know how boys are, he added with a chuckle. They used the skeleton on Halloween and never did take it away. You're sure your son put it there? Nancy asked thoughtfully. Well, who else would have done it? Nancy did not reply. Instead, she began an investigation of the wardrobe. She figured it was just possible Fip March had rigged the strange figure to frighten away all but members of his own family. Perhaps this was his hiding place for the missing music. Excited, Nancy held up the candle in order to examine every inch of the old piece of furniture. When a hasty glance revealed nothing but dust and cobwebs, she tapped the sides, the top, and the bottom for sliding panels. None came to light. Effie, tired of waiting, coaxed Nancy to go downstairs. Mr. March, concerned about Susan during their long absence, said she thought they should all go below. Nancy did not want to give up the search, but out of deference to the elderly man's wishes, she reluctantly followed the others down to the second floor. I'm going to look at that old wardrobe again soon, she said to herself. I have a hunch it holds a strange secret. For 2 hours, she and Mr. March talked and listened to the radio that she had brought. Nancy was disappointed that they had not heard the song, which he thought was his son's. Finally, at 10 o'clock, the elderly man rose and smiled at his guest. I believe I will go to bed now. Thank you very much for everything. I wish the mystery were near to being solved, Nancy said. Nancy went to the room assigned to her, but could not sleep. She kept thinking about the skeleton and the man Effie had seen outside the house. Time and again she roused at unfamiliar sounds on the grounds and in the house. Then, the next time she opened her eyes, it was morning. Whoa, nearly 8 o'clock, she said in astonishment, looking at her watch. I did get some sleep after all. I believe I'll hurry home and have breakfast with Dad before he goes into his office. Explaining to Mr. March that she would return later, Nancy drove to her own house. There she found her father in his study examining something under a microscope. Oh, hello, he greeted her, looking up from his work and kissing her. I thought maybe you'd come and eat with your old dad. Any adventures last night? None, except that a skeleton and I got a little chummy. What? She related all that had happened at Pleasant Hedges, adding that she planned to investigate the wardrobe further. That attic is a strange place indeed, Mr. Drew commented. Then he turned to a problem of his own. I'm glad you came back, Nancy, or I believe I would have driven out to get you. Oh, something wrong? Not exactly, but I'm puzzled. See these? He pointed towards his desk. On it lay two white silk women's scarves, which appeared to be identical. What in the world are you doing with those? Nancy asked. Another case, her father smiled. Then he added, take a look at these two scarves. Does the material appear exactly the same to you? Well, Nancy examined them carefully. I can see no difference. Nor can I, even under a microscope, declared her father. Nancy fingered the material as Mr. Drew paused. He stared into space as if puzzled about something. What's the problem? Nancy asked. The scarves are manufactured by separate businesses, Mr. Drew explained. My client, Mr. Booker, president of the Booker Manufacturing Company, says that another company has stolen his formula for making the special material used in them, and they could ruin his business. What's the name of the other company? The Lucius Dite Corporation. Oh, I know the place, Nancy said. Mr. Dite's daughter Diane was in one of my classes in school. She's a little older than I am. You say her father has stolen something? Mr. Drew looked concerned. Is Diane your friend, Nancy? He asked. No, Dad, I wouldn't call her that. She goes around with an entirely different crowd. Diane's an attractive-looking girl, but she's spoiled. It's fortunate she's not a particular friend, Mr. Drew said, much relieved, because I'd like you to do a little sleuthing for me on this case. Ooh, I'd love to. I thought so. While you and I eat breakfast, I'll tell you what I heard from Mr. Booker yesterday afternoon. Father and daughter took their places at the breakfast table. Then Mr. Drew began his story. My client, Mr. Booker, suspects that a former workman of his, named Bushy Trot, was in reality a spy from the Dite factory. What a curious name, Bushy Trot. I think it's his nickname. That's what I assume. I've seen a photograph of the man, a coarse-looking fellow with wild, bushy black hair. So, Mr. Booker believes that Bushy worked at the plant only to learn the secret process for making the silk material? Yeah, that's what he thinks. He thinks that the man was sent as a spy by Mr. Dite. Until recently, the Dite plant manufactured only synthetic material, not silk. Well, how can I help on the case? Nancy inquired. I was wondering that myself until you mentioned knowing Diane Dite. Do you suppose that through her you might be able to look around her father's plant? As a rule, visitors are barred. If I, a lawyer, should go, the owner might become suspicious of my motives. I'd be glad to try, Nancy offered. If I get into the factory, what am I supposed to do? Locate Bushy Trot? Mainly that, yes. And if you can observe the process used to make the silk material like the one used in these scarves, we'll have something to work on, Mr. Drew declared. It's a stiff assignment, his daughter mused, but no harder than the case of the missing music I'm working on. Perhaps if you work on my new project for a while and then go back to the other one, you'll approach it with a fresh eye, Mr. Drew suggested. After her father had gone into the office, Nancy pondered how she might get in touch with Diane Dite without arousing the girl's suspicion about her sudden show of friendship. While she was studying the problem, George Fane dropped in. Why the furrowed brow? George said. I was thinking about how I'm going to cultivate a friendship with Diane Dite, Nancy replied. Diane Dite? How could you like that girl is a puzzle to me, George said. Well, did I say I like her? Nancy countered, her eyes twinkling. I might have known, George said. You think she's involved in some mystery. Don't tell me she stole Phip March's music. No, not that. I'd just like to get her to take me through her father's factory. She'd never even bothered, George said, always too busy talking about herself and the latest dress she's having made at Madame Perret's. I don't know that dressmaker. Mother's having one made there to wear to a wedding. It's funny you should mention Diane because she was there the other day when Mother was and raised a real storm. Diane wanted Madame Perret to stop all her other work and finish a dress so that she could take it away with her. So she isn't in town, said Nancy, disappointed. I don't know how long Diane is going to be away. Why don't you phone her house and find out? It would be better if I could just get the information some other way. How about the dressmaker? George suggested. Mother has a fitting there at 11 this morning. Suppose you and I go with her. Ooh, a great idea. The two girls hurried off to join Mrs. Fane. They caught her just leaving the house. A little later, Nancy was introduced to Madame Perret. Nancy complimented the dressmaker on Diane Dight's clothes. Her figure is slim and easy to fit, said the dressmaker, but I'm afraid her diet is too much. And her diet, it keeps you happy or else it makes you cross when you do not eat enough. Diane is out of town, isn't she? Nancy asked. She returned today at 2 o'clock. She's on a train. I'm afraid there's going to be another scene when she comes here to get her gown because it's not finished. Quickly, Nancy saw an opportunity to get in touch with Diane. She offered to meet the girl at the station and tell her that the dress was not ready. Oh, would you? That would be most kind. And please tell Miss Diane also that her papa wishes to hear from her as soon as she arrives. George grinned broadly. Nancy had managed to arrange the perfect setup for herself. After Mrs. Fane and the two girls left the dressmaker's, George congratulated her friend. I'm so happy. I'm inviting you both to lunch, Nancy grinned. Then I'll tell you, Mrs. Fane, what a schemer I am. The meal was a delightful one, and immediately afterward, Nancy hastened home to change her clothes. When she came downstairs half an hour later, Hannah Gruen looked at her in amazement. Wherever are you going so dressed up? I'm going for a drive with the best dressed girl in River Heights, Diane Dight, Nancy giggled, gave the housekeeper a hug, and then hurried away mysteriously. Please give Dad that message if he should phone, she called from the garage. Nancy drove immediately to the train station. The 2 o'clock train was just coming in. Quickly, she parked the car and dashed across the platform. The first passenger to step down was Diane Dight. As Nancy went towards the girl, her heart beat faster. Was her plan going to work? And that is the end of chapter 5. Tune in again when I'll be reading chapter 6. See you then.